Hi, welcome to the Religion Hurts podcast. My name is Mike Harrison, and I'm really excited to have you be part of this episode. It's been kind of fun getting back to this. This is episode number 2, or 16 overall of season 2. Not 16 of season 2, episode 2 of season 2, and but 16 overall. And it's been a trip doing these. Hopefully, the goal is as I get a little bit more into this, maybe we'll get into the microphones and some of the cool technical stuff. Right now, it's just me and my iPhone and my hotel room, as evidenced by the bed in the background. As I talked about in the last podcast, I am working for Marvin Windows Driving, and so I spend my evenings in hotel rooms like this all over the country, and but it works great to just be able to sit there and just have a quiet space at the end of the night to do this. It had been an 8-month break. Just a quick recap of the last episode. It had been like an 8-month break. I think it was September till last week. And since I had done a podcast, just for some health reasons and stuff going on, just a bunch of changes and things of that nature. And so now I'm getting back to podcasting again. And so a little rusty, a little kind of all over the place probably, so forgive me for that. The goal of this podcast, again, Religion Hurts, just for a quick refresher is I truly believe religion, which I define as the tradition or the way that we almost pretend that we know God. We do things out of some kind of tradition or some kind of form or some kind of fashion, without any actual relationship. I think a relationship with God is vital to our lives, actually. But I think that doing just religion, no relationship and just doing things based out of a certain way, I think is super destructive and causes a lot of damage and a lot of hurt. And so in my life, if you go back to all the episodes of season 1, I'm going to give just a really short recap of my life and my testimony for those that are maybe just joining for the first time, or just a quick refresher. Grew up in a Christian home essentially, but had an abusive father. I don't think he ever got diagnosed as it, or that he'd ever admit to anyway. But he was a narcissist. He was really difficult, really challenging, often angry, cruel, mean, a lot of those kinds of things. I was molested at a young age and worked my way up through all that stuff, and living in that house that was often full of turmoil, watched him be abusive to my mom a lot. And then got married at 24, I believe, and moved to the U.S. I'm originally from Canada. I moved to the U.S., where my wife is from, and just kind of, I'm just trying to jump ahead and figure exactly where to say it, but then through a long series of circumstances, fast forward, we were living in North Dakota. We had one son at that point, and Christy, my wife, was pregnant, and we decided that we were going to, and my dad had a lung transplant, and after his lung transplant, he had a lung disease. Started when I was 12, I believe. So now at this point, I'm a little over 30, actually, at this point. So my dad had been sick a long time with sarcoidosis, ended up having a lung transplant. And he was living in Manitoba, about 3.5 hours from us. And my brother and my dad's brother, Hank, were business partners in a construction business that I used to work for and my dad used to work for. I moved away when I got married. My dad got too sick and kind of was forced to retire. They stayed on with the construction business, and they had sold it and moved to Ontario to go to Toronto Airport Church. None of that really matters as far as their story goes. And then they got to be part of a small group, which eventually became a cult. And my dad, after having a lung transplant, he was a very different guy, a lot softer, a lot kinder. He'd come out to visit us in North Dakota, and both my wife and I just saw such a transformation in who he was. and we decided that we wanted to go out there and spend some time. And when we were out there, we got to meet the group that my brother Chris and Hank were part of. And it was, at the time, it was a small group at TACF, and then they do some, they meet at a person's house once during the week. And TACF is the Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship, which is a pretty big church where Toronto Blessing happened. You can dig into all that stuff, and I don't want to drag on with the story, all that backstory too long. But we ended up going out there to go to a couple events and see my parents again and do all that kind of stuff. And we got to meet and know all of them. And eventually, you have to go back to the episodes to get back into my mindset for it all. But eventually we decided that we wanted to be around my dad a little bit again, and my brother, and there were some cool things happening there. We'd always wanted in Christianese, I like to call it the Acts Church experience. That's where there's a lot of charismatics have this view that they want to get to this Acts type of church, like where the miracles are happening all the time, where the different things like that are happening all the time. And they're like living and pursuing that as their main goal. That and getting ready for the end times. It's a huge thing talked about in that kind of church and that kind of circle. Trying to do the Benny Hinn kind of thing, where the miracles are happening all the time. Now, I'm not actually, for those watching, I'm not actually a huge supporter of Benny Hinn anymore. And yeah, you're welcome to have a conversation with me. Why I won't get into that on here, but that's often what they're pursuing, is things of that nature. And so that's what this group was. And being as that's something that my wife and I at the time was really important to us, that we felt like, we wanted to be part of some people call it a full gospel church. Some people will call a church that's free and completely filled with Jesus. There's all these ways of saying it, but basically it's a type of church or type of organization that is seeing essentially miracles happen and all that kind of a thing. When people are talking about that, that's often what they're wanting to see is that kind of a thing. And and I think on a different episode, I'm probably going to get a little bit more into detail on some of that kind of stuff. But for sake of kind of sticking to the script here, we ended up moving out there to be around my family and to kind of partly be around this group. Well, the group grew, got to be quite a few people, 60, 70 people, eventually branched off from TACF and kind of became its own church. Not forced or anything like that. They just kind of started to want to do that. They believed God was doing more, and it was led by two people named Chris and Brenda. And early on, it was just kind of a radical home church is basically what I call it. They're doing things that were a little crazy, little, over the top, but nothing that was really extreme. But it over time became much more extreme. They started manipulating people for money, a lot of us for money and for doing things. A lot of us would work in businesses and work for people, and we all would started to live with multiple families to a house, because that's what we could afford. And then a lot of the money we were making would go into the group and the purpose of what that group or that cult was called to do. And then from there, it got to be that different members, like my brother started a construction company, and then he'd employ a bunch of the people from the group, but often not pay them and put that money towards that group and towards what they were trying to do. And, it became more and more and more cultish. And it's in a short little session like this where I've just talked about it for 3 minutes, I'm sure, because even to me, it sounds insane. How in the world did you go into that? But nothing happens fast. Everything happens slow, and it's step by step by step. And this is like over, what I'm talking about already is over 3-4 years of steps to get to that point. And there's a lot of pressure, a lot of manipulation, a lot of I don't even know how you group dynamic where the entire group is calling out one person at a time, and then it switches to somebody else, and just a lot of things that are right out of a cult playbook, actually, that I've learned since being out and studying a lot more about cults. And essentially, we got to the point that I was running a business for them. This is now almost 10 years in to being there. I was running a business for them. And I think we were in that group total of 9 years. I'd have to figure out exactly. My son was born in 2011. We moved in October of 2010, and we got out in spring of 2019. So really close to maybe essentially 9 years, right around there. So we're about 8 years-ish into this, and the group was basically they had set up this business. I wasn't originally part of the business. The guy that originally ran it, he left. They asked me to take over. I got involved in the business, literally signed my name and my life away to the business, only to find out how much money they were actually taking out was destroying, bankrupting the business, taking money from customers. Did a little bit to see what I could do to reverse it, change it, realized this is a disaster, shut it down. I took all the fall for it and all the hit. I went trucking to kind of make ends meet, pay the bills. And it was during that time in the truck that I spent a lot of one-on-one time in prayer and time with God and all these things. Was able to get to kind of a realization of everything they were doing, picked apart, to undo essentially what was brainwashing. It's a whole process to go through. So I worked hard to undo all that process, and then left. We left the group. My wife and I got out, moved to Minnesota, where we had first lived when we got married, and kind of moved back up here. Got to be around some friends that we'd known for probably 18 years, just were super healthy for us, and a healthy church. We've been going to that church since. That's 2019. So yeah, we've been going to that church now 7 years. Got some of our most dear friends in the world in that church. Been a huge blessing. And so having lived through that whole experience of growing up in a Christian home where abuse was rampant, watching many different situations as I was a young man going into youth group and the different things, and the way I watched, for example, I got into this in past stories, but watched my youth leaders get kind of trashed and the fallout that came from that. Watching the different cliques that would happen because one group went to this church, one group went to that church, and the different things that happen in those dynamics when you're growing up, to then watching, as I was a young man, seeing different churches that seemed to be growing and then they'd split, and watching that incredible damage. And then, going to being part of this cult and watching the extreme of what happens with religious manipulation. And inadvertently, I feel a little bit like an expert on religion. I'm not, but I feel like I am, in the sense that I've lived through a lot of that stuff. And so it's been my goal, my heart, to share my testimony, partly to expose what's going on for anybody that's wants to see this group, wants to know about this group, wants to see exactly what's going on. I want it exposed. I want it to be known to the world what they're doing. They've stolen so much money from people, and they've stolen so much life. There's four other people aside from myself that I'm thinking about tonight, that I rejoice with them and my heart is heavy for them at the same time. And that's Christy, Josh, Joel, and Tim. Those are our four people in my life that are probably some of the closest people that are in my life. Christy obviously is my wife, but some of the closest people in my life, these are people that were in the group with me and now are out of the group, and in various walks in their life, all fully in a relationship with God, all actually doing really well. But the collective amount of heart hurt and destruction that's happened in each of their lives. Each one of them could sit here and do hours and hours of their own podcast talking about the amount of destruction and things that are going on. I don't want to tell any of their stories specifically, except for I'm hoping at some point maybe to actually interview one or two of them on the podcast when we go into the future. And in a near future episode, I'm actually going to do one with my wife, Christy, where she can tell her testimony a little bit of what's happened in her life, and just to give it a bit of a different perspective. And just some of those things. But I don't want to get into, there's ex-wives and children and massive destruction involved in this. And I don't want to tell somebody else's story for them. I just know my heart hurts at what they've each gone through and the things that they've had to do to overcome that hurt and pain and the destruction. For a very short example, Tim's wife, now ex-wife, is still in the group, and he got pushed out because they use shunning as a huge tool to force submission. And again, I'm not going to go any further than this, but his wife is still in there, and the pain and the hurt that he's had to endure, I can't even hardly comprehend. And I was in that group, but I can't hardly comprehend the weight of what he's had to go through to be where he's at today. And the strength that's taken to be standing upright today is only through Jesus. I know that. But by the way, super proud of you, Tim. Really proud of you. But it's this hasn't been an easy road for him or the others that I mentioned, Josh and Joel and Christy, or myself. It's not been an easy road. It's been a fruitful one. It's been awesome to see the victories that have come for those, but for others as well. I know there's so many people, so much family. I'm just talking about the ones that were directly involved in it, but the family that was on the outside, still on the outside looking in, I didn't have a perspective of what that was like when I was in the group. You know, we were taught that all of our family was anti-God and all kinds of things that we were taught that's simply not true. And now I'm sitting on the outside. My grandma, my mom's mom, passed away close to Christmas this past year in 25. Which I miss her. I miss Grandma. But one of the hardest things to go through is because my mom is in this cult still. My mom and my brother are still in this cult. Was I sat there at my grandma's funeral watching as my mom's brother and two sisters were there honoring their mom, and my mom should have been there. And I was in the group, and I can't comprehend why she wasn't. I can't comprehend the divisiveness and the abuse and the manipulation and the insanity and the hurt. I can't hardly comprehend it. And that broke my heart. And I've been seeing an entirely different side of the effect that this cult has. But I was talking to a different friend recently, who's been out of church for a number of years because she got destroyed. her and her husband got destroyed in a church. I've got really good friends in North Dakota, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts, where a pastor just took a church of almost 100 people and did a bunch of crazy things, created so much division and destruction that 70 people were gone. In a small little farming community in North Dakota where I've got all of Christy's family is, or most of Christy's family is, and the rest are from. And the division that's come from that, the division that's still in Christy's family over a brother-in-law who's a pastor that says, you're not my brother and sister or family unless you believe exactly as I believe. And that kind of destruction that comes, it's not the character of Christ. It's not the way he is. It's not the way he does things. And yet this viewpoint that we can somehow, because we're Christians, or we're saved, or we have revelation of who God is, or we're servants of God, and we're all these things, we have this viewpoint in these situations where we believe we can do almost whatever we want, like somehow we're untouchable. I get that the Bible says that we are God's children. I get that the Bible says once we're saved, we're considered to be sons, just like Jesus is the firstborn son. We're continual sons and daughters of that. And somehow, it's like people take that upon themselves to then have the right to, I don't know, the right to abuse, to destroy, to take advantage of, to do all these things, and somehow that's the character of God. Like, it obviously isn't, but we're justified because we're doing God's work. We throw money away in churches. We waste on all these things. We get so often more concerned about how we look and how we're doing and how these things are going, and we don't stop to be kind and take care of our fellow brother and sister. How is that the heart of God? How is that his character? How is that ever his character? And I'm preaching and reacting a little bit at the moment, and I get that. But it's so destructive. It destroys, just like I talked about, those 4 people right there in that center of all that. But then you go down the line of the amount of family that's been affected and hurt and broken and destroyed by this is unbelievable. Someday I pray that my mom will come out of this. And when she does, she's not going to get another chance to tell my grandma goodbye. To tell her mom goodbye. And her mom won't get a chance to do that for her. That's something that's never going to come again. What a shame. Just what a shame. But not really sure how to end the podcast from there. I apologize. It's a weight today. It's a heavy thing today. Just on the reflection, it's been a bit heavy. But on the other side, this is what I want to say. I truly believe that as much damage and destruction as we can see in some of these things, the amount of life and beauty and joy that I've seen come through a relationship with God is the exact opposite of that destruction of religion. So it's not just my goal to talk about the destruction and that, because a testimony is half the story is the destruction. The other half the story, the incredible part of the story, is the picking up, the moving forward, and the seeing the restoration, the life, the beauty, the joy. Yeah. It's an incredible thing. I watched both of my aunts, both of my mom's sisters, leading up to that funeral, at the funeral, and after, but just watch them move with grace and kindness and compassion for everybody around them. And I got to be part of that. I'm not in that group. I didn't miss that. I got to be there. I got to see these two precious women who I love shine. And it sounds weird to say about your aunts, but I'm proud of both of them and who they are and the way they've raised their families and those things. And I get to have some restoration with them and closeness with them. And so I'm emotional because I feel blessed and grateful, and I'm thankful. And that came through prayer, and that came through them praying and fighting for us, praying and fighting to come back. And so I don't want to leave it on heaviness. I want to leave it with a sense of beauty and gratefulness. And so thank you for joining me on this podcast today. Thank you for listening to me and hearing my heart. We have a new email for anybody that's wanting to connect. I think it's going to come up here right at the bottom, right at the end. The Religion Hurts podcast at gmail.com. Anytime you want to connect, you want to share about something you're going through, you just want somebody to connect to. Doesn't matter who, what, where, what's going on. I'd be happy to talk to you. Love to hear from you. And until next time, I'm Mike Harrison, and God bless.